actions. I grew up copying, looking at all the women in my class and being like, oh, okay. So if I sit like this, or if I sit a certain way, like that's not good, And again, I grew up very, very conservative. Not that my family was conservative, but it was like kind of the world around us.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it's the type of thing where like I literally had to copy people. Like my mother is a sweet Southern lady. God bless Donna. She's so great. But like she's such a sweet like Southern lady that like she would have me wear certain type of makeup. I had to go out in makeup. I had to go out in a certain type of outfit, a very feminine outfit, which is fine. But that I just always felt very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, because there is something to when you get together with a group of people, this sense of we all have this kind of tribal need to feel accepted and to be a part of something. But you felt like you didn't fit naturally into that, and you were just kind of faking it to kind of be a part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like that's how I felt for majority of my life. I mean, obviously, that being said, like when you're a kid before you kind of go through puberty, a lot of lesbians will have guy crushes, or a lot of, it's just the type of thing where it's like so normalized in our society that, boys like blue, girls like pink, that type of thing. And it's just so normalized. So gender actually comes from society in its whole. And it comes from, males are supposed to go out into the workforce, and like, even from the beginning of like not biology, but like cavemen, like, you're supposed to go out and you're supposed to, the men go and kill the beasts and the women take care of the kids, that type of thing. And so that is actually, gender is a social construct. And so that being said, like, I just never felt super comfortable in my own body. Number one, I never felt comfortable. I'd get dressed up. I would go get dressed up for prom, or I'd get dressed up for all these different things. And I'd kind of be like, I'd feel like I wasn't feminine enough, or I would feel like, I had to look a certain way, act a certain way, because I would think people would like me that way. And it's also kind of like, I would always kind of be like, why can't I wear a suit? Why can't I wear a suit to, prom, or why can't I wear a suit to, whatever. And like,
how old were you when you first started kind of thinking those thoughts?
Oh boy. I mean, it depends. It depends on like certain thoughts. So like growing up, I had a couple, I called them my siblings. So I had two like brothers that lived down the street. And that being said, like I grew up literally just always playing with them, copying their actions. Like they never considered me a girl, if that makes sense. So like I like always grew up that way, where like I was such a tomboy. I was such, whatever. And at the same time, like I would kind of always be confused because I would be like so uncomfortable around women. I mean, I was always, I would always have female friends, stuff like that, but it was like very like people who ended up definitely like being lesbians later in life. Like, like I wouldn't be friends. Yeah. I wouldn't be friends with a ton of feminine women, because I just didn't get that. And so it's the type of thing where like I grew up, that was probably when I was like really young, probably like 8 or so.
Wow.
Like super, super young. And like, I never really thought about it until I went to therapy, which again, huge advocate for therapy. And so then it kind of ended up coming to a head when I was a senior in college. And just kind of, we have something called Bridge Builders on campus, where it's like bridging faith and sexuality. And because we weren't allowed to have like a gay straight alliance, because Belmont didn't necessarily support LGBTQIA people.
Yeah, because like, Belmont is technically a religious school, right?
Yes, they had a Baptist affiliation. They used to have a Baptist affiliation where they actually had to fire a soccer coach for being gay. And so that was like 2006 maybe, I want to say.
Wow. Yeah.
It was still fairly recently. And so they actually dropped the Baptist backing when they kind of realized that we had a gay straight alliance, for better term. And we actually have had Westboro Baptist come to our school. We have personally had Shirley come to our school from Westboro Baptist.
Wow, you guys are really special.
Yeah, it was wild. But a lot of everybody in the Gay Straight Alliance, or in Bridge Builders, is what it's called. They actually gathered around the bell tower and had a prayer service for Westboro. It was very powerful, very amazing.
I don't know anybody of really any belief system that supports Westboro. I think that is a really, really fringe group.
You'd be surprised.
Oh,
You'd be surprised. I don't know if
maybe I just hang out with better people.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that necessarily. People are saying like, oh, I'm part of Westboro. Like, I don't know if people would say that, but it's like, I take 1 step, 1 centimeter out of Nashville, and it's bad. People are staring at me. People are gawking at me. I've had somebody, you know, out of town who's clearly a tourist. I was waiting on my girlfriend outside her job. I had him come up and say, you'll probably have to bleep this. Sorry. I had him come up and say, what a faggot.
Oh.
Look at me and straight up say that.
Wow.
And I just kind of went,
cool. Side note, we were watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and they used that term in the second movie. And I was like, whoa, talk about a word that has really been expulsed from society. Because that was something me and my friends called each other all the time growing up. And like, I can't remember the last time. Oh, I know. It was The Hangover. I feel like The Hangover is the last movie where somebody used that term.
Absolutely. And it's like, it's becoming more of a reclaimed term. It's personally not something I use, because I still think it has negative connotations, except for in Britain, a fag is a cigarette.
Right.
So Britain is the only exception. But that being said, like, I don't, it still doesn't sit comfortably with me,
Sure.
just because people still call me it. And I just kind of look at them and I'm like, I mean, I guess you're right, but like, cool. Like, come up with a different
but they're saying it in a derogatory fashion.
Correct. Oh yeah. And so it's
it's the intent behind it that, yeah.
Oh, totally. And it's kind of like the word queer as well, where it's like, you know, somebody outside the community can't use it unless someone identifies as genderqueer. Genderqueer is where your gender is always kind of changing. It's on a sliding scale. So that being said, so going back to the whole gender conversation, it's like, I never identified with being a woman. I identified more with being kind of both, but also more male side. And so that being said, like, I ended up going to therapy. I ended up going to a fantastic therapist, who's a gender specialist.
This wasn't like a religious corrective therapy?
No. No. I will not go anywhere near those.
Yeah.
No. So, I mean, let me go into like the religious conversation too. So I used to be very, very religious. I used to be kind of the same way as you, where I would be super Christian, super, you know, against these ideas. I was homophobic for some of my life, which happens to a lot of gay people. And not saying everybody that's homophobic is secretly gay, but it depends on the person. Anyway, that being said, so I almost said something which I'm not going to say, but anyway, that being said, it's like, you know, we're brought up in a society that really capitalizes on the idea of you have to be homosexual to reproduce, and you have to identify your sex and your gender have to identify, or else you're weird. And, you know, this is kind of a headspace, a conversation that not a lot of people still understand. And it's still becoming more normalized, if that makes sense. So it's like, right. I ended up going to therapy, and I was like, okay, like, I don't fully identify as a woman, but I don't, let me figure out how to phrase this. So basically, I don't like denouncing people to their genitals. That is not something that I'm comfortable with, but in my case, this is the only way I can kind of find it. So I don't like my chest, a lot of the time. I'm actually wearing something that's called a binder, where it reduces your chest. But I am fine with my other parts. So that being said, I identify as non-binary because some days I really do like being more feminine. I won't ever wear a dress again. That's just not me. But like, because I feel kind of more or less like a man in a dress, which like, I mean, clothing isn't gendered. But like, that being said,
that's interesting that you say that, because you would think that putting on a dress would make you feel more feminine, but it has the opposite effect on you.
I just feel so out of place. I feel so uncomfortable. No matter how many people tell me like, oh, you're really pretty, or you look great, I'm just kind of like, yeah, but I feel fake. I feel very imposter syndrome, I think is what it's called, where I feel very out of place. I feel like I'm acting a part. I feel like I'm not really who I am. And then kind of when I'm more in a suit, when I'm like very, you know, dressed up in a suit, and I do like makeup. And so it's like, that's the whole reason why I identify as non-binary, is because I have all these conflicting feelings where it's like, I don't want to fully be a trans male. I don't identify with being a man, but I don't necessarily identify with being a woman. So I'm kind of in the middle.
I see. So then does this put you kind of in that queer category, or
it does.
You would not just call yourself a lesbian?
So I would not. I don't have a label for my sexuality, because as I'm kind of becoming more comfortable with who I am, like I am dating a woman who identifies as a lesbian. Mm-hmm. And like, she has fought hard to have that label. She has fought hard because she comes from a conservative family as well. And she is like one of the only out people in her family. And so she comes from kind of that label, but she says that I'm the exception. And so it's the type of thing where she's normally, and like when we first started dating, I was very open with her, and I was like, hey, still trying to figure this out. Don't know if I'm a trans male. Don't know what exactly I am. I don't know how, like, I don't know. She was very polite and was like, you know what? Like, if I like you as a person, like, let's try it. And I was like, all right, cool. And so now we've been dating for about a year and a half. Cool. And she's like, best woman I've ever dated. And so that being said, it's like, she still identifies as a lesbian, and like, I like all sorts of people, you know. Okay. I don't like, no offense, I don't like cis men. That's not somebody
wow, I'm personally offended. The fact that you just said you like so many different kinds of people except me. Wow. I can't believe you went there.
except men. There you go. I mean, that's just like me personally. But like, I'm willing to, you know, date trans people. I'm willing to date other non-binary people, you know. And it's like, I use the pronouns they, them. And so that being said, they, them is not plural. It's actually singular. So, you know, whenever you're driving down the street and you see somebody's car and you're like, you don't know who's driving it, and you say, oh, their car, or that person's car.
Yeah.
And so like, for me, a lot of people either just use, I mean, a lot of people call me she, her, which is fine. I'm not offended. That's perfectly fine. A lot of people,
you don't use it as an opportunity to lash out at them and say, how dare you? It sounds like you're somewhat tolerant of recognizing your conservative upbringing and saying, okay,
oh yeah,
I get this, but not everybody else does. So it's natural that they're going to want to refer to me as she.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, a lot of trans people are very, very comfortable to the point where, like, you know, especially if they're like a trans male and someone says like, oh, she, they'll kind of gently be like, oh, you know, my name's Henry and I go by he, him. And that's it. It's a very respectful conversation. Obviously, you have to have that conversation with people that, you know, respect you. Because some people will just kind of write it off and be like, oh, well, you know, you're queer or whatever, and derogatory fashion. But that being said, it's like, you know, you can have these conversations with people, and like, it's not kind of like the memes kind of make it out to be, where people are like, you're misgendering me and like all this different stuff. No, a lot of people a lot of the time just want the basic decency of being identified for who they are.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of like, I don't want to generalize people, but a lot of conservative people kind of find this as like, oh, you're misgendering me, or like, you know, there's a certain video of a trans woman going into a store and saying like, you know, oh, you're misgendering me, and it's like this huge deal, and like a lot of people make fun of her, but like at the end of the day, that can really bother people, you know. Sure. that can really bother people. Me again, as much, like, because how I grew up and how, you know, my family are very supportive of me being gay, but they don't quite necessarily understand the gender thing or the name change or anything like that. And the name change comes from two things. So therapy, which like, I end up just kind of feeling that like, you know, I had a lot of struggles. I have a lot of struggles with, you know, anxiety, PTSD, depression, all this different stuff. Again, I went through therapy. Huge advocate for therapy. Fantastic. As long as you can find like a fantastic therapist that's for you. Yeah. That's great.
Not someone that has an agenda to make you feel or think a certain way.
Which I've been there. I've been to a therapist like that, and which was very, very bad and ended up wrecking a lot of relationships. But that being said,